So I'll just do a quick intro on the topic here, and then I'd love us to do personal intros. So right now, everything is about AI. If any of you out there listening or anything have missed that, then you've been sleeping in a wardrobe for a couple of months at least. I think it's obvious for everybody that CapEx spending is going quite up, all the valuations are going up. And what we're going to discuss today is really about applying AI and dissecting what that means into really figuring out how do you actually tackle hard and complex industries that anything from manufacturing, logistics, defense, or anything that actually are industries that previously have been very hard for startups to approach, just because it's like way more harder integration and like building them, and usually way more costly than a startup usually handles. We've all seen that's changed on this panel, and just the last 2 years. And I think now it's I think a thesis for more all of us to look at those industries. So that's the plan for today. So we're going to dissect a bit what AI is and dissect on which industries and everything that we think are most interesting, but also explain what we're investing in. So if you're interested in reaching out, then you know where to get us. Also, if you have any questions, just write on the chat and we'll try to figure out. But let's do quick intros. Sarah, do you want to start?
Yeah, thanks, Hampus, and hi, everyone. Great to be talking about this very interesting topic. So, started my career in aerospace engineering, certainly an industry to be disrupted, worked in aircraft manufacturing, and then I built a company in the energy space. We did renewable energy forecasts for big utilities and as well governments, and ended up my journey in the VC world. First in a fund called Hummingbird, and now in Silence, we're a global early stage fund, and we're definitely investing in AI for the industrial space, more from a side of software, I'd say, but also SaaS-enabled hardware. And yeah, very excited for this panel.
Great. Do you want to go next, Sam?
Yes, thank you, Hampus, for hosting, and to SOSV. It's amazing to be here. The quick introduction on me is I run a fund called Entropy Industrial Capital, which is a pre-seed focused fund broadly doing deep tech. We invest very heavily, as the name suggests, in industrials. So that's everything from manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, national security, and occasionally space. I spend the majority of my professional life and free time speaking to amazing founders that are building incredible hardware solutions in these hard industries. And many of them are using AI as either native and core to the product or as a means of increasing their iteration cycle for whatever hardware they are building. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I've been in venture capital for a decade. I was previously a partner at a fund called Project A and an early employee at Head of Sophia, and really excited for the panel.
Great, thank you. Jean-Philippe, do you want to go?
Hi, guys. So my name is Jean-Philippe. I'm probably the elder of this panel. And I'm French, as you can notice, probably. I'm replacing Ronan de Villiers, who unfortunately is in Ankara visiting a socks factory right now and cannot do it at the latest minute because he had some plane issues. I'm partner at OSS Venture. So OSS Venture is a startup studio. We are more or less a factory designing software for factories. We exist for the past 6 years, and we have created almost 30 companies. Only 22 of them are still alive because, unfortunately, we have some impairment. But these companies have 100,000 users all over the world, and spread in over 2,800 sites. So we spend more or less our life on factory sites, and it's very exciting to be here with you guys.
Thank you. Thanks for joining. And then my name is Hampus Jacobson, and I run a fund together with my two co-founders called Pale Blue Dot. That's not the name of my co-founders. We do pre-seed and seed investment, and we used to call ourselves a climate fund. And I think what we're explaining ourselves what we do to make sure that people understand is that we essentially see ourselves investing in this macro shift that climate creates, which ends up being a lot of it being logistics, manufacturing, and all of these hard industries that we're going to talk about today. So this is something that we're very, very excited about and something that we're spending quite a lot of time on discussing. I think it's very obvious, I think, for all of us. what happened the last year, that like big industries are trying to build faster. If you look what happened between like now when like Trump is onshoring everything they're doing, Europe is of course considering the same. If you're looking at the defense budgets of most European countries, that also means that a lot of the production has to, increase drastically. And these are anything from obviously also wind turbines and everything else. A lot of these things are hard, complex things that need to be built. But the question is, how do you build them and how do you finance them? And I think that I'm just going to start out by saying that when we discussed this a couple of weeks ago, Sam, Sarah, and then of course Renan, but Jean-Philippe is definitely up to par with this, is that we really see two kinds of AI companies. And my plan is now I'm going to throw it out there and then hope that the rest of you people here just attack me. And my background is that I'm a computer scientist. I did my degree in AI, but in 1999, which meant it was not AI. But I really see a lot of the AI companies that I'm meeting are actually two categories: fundamental AI, which are the Mistrals and those, which are actually building foundational models, and they're really, really complex things that are also very horizontal. It's a bit unclear what they're exactly going to be used for, but some kind of Gen AI structure. And of course, it doesn't have a Gen AI, it can be computer vision or anything else. The other category are ones that are using AI. As like Sam said before here, like we see plenty of companies that are essentially not fundamentally like pushing AI forward, but they're using AI kind of like the way that in the year 2000 we would call a software company. So I think that when Pale Blue Dot looks at companies, we're very, very excited about companies that are the second category, that are using AI to approach and solve these some problems. We also look at hardware and like some of these fundamental models and foundational technologies, but our most of interest is in the second category, which are companies that are using AI to solve problems that were previously not solvable or too expensive. Like Sam, Sarah, Jean-Philippe, do you want to like push in or like have opinions about that statement of companies that are using AI?
Yeah, I'll touch on this first. So we've invested in a company called Ali. They're helping automate workflows in the industrial side. Well, a bit more on the food space, but still, I think the principles are the same. And what they're helping is to, number one, bring context. So help these models help have better understanding on how things work and building a vertical integrated workflow. So these AI agents that they have also can automate parts of the process. But I think there's an interesting talk, and I know we'll touch into it later on when we say AI, whether we're talking about AI from the 60s, like Hampus, you already touched on your background of AI pre-craziness of 2017 onwards and post-craziness. So Ali is a good example of leveraging these new changes, but I think there's a ton to be done still in this space as well.
Now, do you want to give an example of a company, or Jean-Philippe, that just figure out to give more like fabric for the listeners to understand what we mean?
The thing is, fundamental model for SS is definitely not our game. We don't have the capital. It's if you don't have conversation with Emmanuel Macron, like Mistral, every 2 weeks, it's not a game you can play. So we definitely play the vertical AI, the software kind of companies you just talked about. We are not only developing AI native companies, we are reviewing and rebuilding part of our existing portfolio in the age of AI. And it has a massive impact. I can talk about a company doing scheduling and planning for manufacturing. Thanks to AI, we've been able to simulate 1 or 2 million scenarios per day in order to identify what should be the best scheduling or planning for the factory next week. And this was not doable before 1.5 years or 2 years max. So reviewing that is completely changing the way this software is impacting the factory production, because before that people were using Excel and you cannot run 2 million scenarios at least within a day on Excel. So yeah, we are playing the second part, the second category, not the first one for sure.
Sam, do you want to go?
Yeah, and I mean, I think from what I've seen, to take it kind of a few steps back, I think the Chat GPT moment was a sort of AI wave. So we use the word AI because it's a sort of very general term, but what was that Chat GPT moment? It was effectively the use of a very specific architecture, so transformer architecture, to effectively provide a net new general technology. And I think from that, that transformer architecture has percolated through a bunch of additional forms of AI. So one that I look at a lot, or I see, founders building with a lot, is specifically VLAs, so vision language action models. And this again it's transformer based, so it's a similar architecture. It's not ChatGPT, but it uses multimodal data, which means chat, video, and images. And it means that you can apply sort of new functionalities to the physical world. So you can use a camera, and you can have the computer or have the robot understand sort of the scene using natural language, and you can derive a bunch of things from that. So I think, you know, the wave itself is really interesting. It's percolated through a bunch of different things. We've also seen it in computer vision. So a lot of segmentation models. So these are where you see these bounding boxes, are now effectively commoditized. So, you know, I spoke to a founder last week, for example, who wants to do precision visual inspection. And so this effectively means when you have a conveyor belt of things that is being produced, you point a camera at it and it will inspect that element. Is the element good to go, or is it defective? And 4 or 5 years ago, and Jean-Philippe probably knows more than me, you would have to handcraft that AI model. You would need to have a bunch of people, probably with PhDs or advanced masters, creating a very specific model to understand these things. You need really, really expensive computer vision cameras, or sensors. But now you can effectively do this for probably under 5,000 euros, from the camera sensor to the model. And that's just one example of, you know, the current wave of AI kind of bringing improvements and commodification to a bunch of really complicated things historically, and making them really, really cheap. And for a lot of the applications that I look at, it's not about the technology, but it's increasingly about using sort of best of breed models that are out there and running really fast and aggressively towards sort of a deployment of that technology. And then maybe lastly, what we've seen from a lot of sort of transformers or ChatGPT is the ability to use it kind of across functions within organizations. So like, we as humans are not good at just processing massive amounts of data or textual data or coordinating across a bunch of different nodes. And I see it a lot with companies. They can use it as sort of a horizontal layer that can process and disseminate information across an organization, whether it's a manufacturing site, whether it's an energy plant, in a way that previously was not possible. So anyway, there's a bunch of really cool things that I guess are popping up because of this.
And I think exactly, Sam, I think Rohit here asked, like, couldn't linear programs do this? And I think the answer to what you asked is, of course you can, right? But like the cost is so much lower suddenly. Like, you can actually build something and disseminate to organization in weeks instead of years. So like, it's not that it's not possible. I think the new wave is that it's price and like completely different in timeline. Jean-Philippe, sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, the funny thing, Sam, is that we've tried to build a company about visual inspection 4 years ago, and that we miserably failed, despite 5 or 6 PhD working on it. The cost of code line was too expensive. The diversity of use cases too wide, broad, and if we had to redo it, and we're considering it today, I think our chance to make it happen would be definitely higher.
Yeah. And it's like, I think we also, when we talked about it a bit, I think this has also changes what kind of teams, like what's required of a team. And I can just like say like for different kind of companies that Pale Auto invested in, and like how we would see that different, and then making sure that you all chime in on how you think about the team change. But for example, we've done one company, Persimmons, hardware for inference. So actual hardware, like actual silicon. Teams are classical silicon teams. It looks very classical. It's more like they know the domain really well, and they know the problem, that this is about energy savings, and that's the big deal. Then we have a company called Phytoform. They essentially do, and sorry for if Phytoform are listening now, but they're essentially doing ChatGPT for plant DNA. So they're able to like manipulate and figure out plant DNA, which is like a whole other model. So like that's like it's a foundational model to actually handle that, which of course requires a lot of context of the problem, but it also is like a pretty gnarly AI problem. Then we have a company called Monta, and I think what's interesting, the EV charging, but fascinating, is that they've essentially done what you talked about a bit, Sam, is that they've tried to figure out ways to essentially disseminate AI within the customer org, and done an interface on top of some of the LLMs. What's fascinating there, and I think we're going to reconnect with it, is that every time the new LLM comes along, so the new Claudes and the new ChatGPTs, their product is like getting thinner, and they have to add a lot more value to kind of keep up to speed. That's just like one tight part of their product. Of course, their main product suite is about charging cars, but it's fascinating to see how when you're building on top of LLMs, you actually like you become commoditized by them if you're doing it just a software layer. And then I think, just giving the fourth example of a company, we've done a company called Hive. It's a last mile delivery company. What's fascinating, what they're using it for, is when you're doing delivery, you essentially are building so much infrastructure internally in your org about like driver pickup times, so like rewards and like recruiting, and like there's just so much stuff in a logistics company. And it's fascinating that they can run this with a very small software team, which otherwise would require probably 100 people software team, and they can now do that with less than 10 people. So I think that those are four very distinct cases and require very different teams. I would say if you take Hive, it's a logistics company. The team looks like a logistics company. They just have one person originally started building internal tech to improve production rate. If you take Persimmons, they're a hardware company. They look just as they did in 1980s. They're just slightly smarter. So I think that, going over to the rest of you, like, how do you feel like teams are changing, and like, what does that mean? Is there like, you're changing your opinion on who to invest in?
If I may, I think it's time for the domain expert to get the revenge right now. In the SaaS period, the value of the line of code was higher than the domain expertise, because you can learn about almost everything. Today, because the cost of line decreased by 50, 100, I don't know exactly. Being a domain expert, being able to understand the commonality, or that you need to build a real product, has definitely more value than it used to be, and we are more and more focusing on the domain expertise, while in the past 100% of our founder were not coming from manufacturing world. It's start to change right now, and we are focusing more and more on domain expertise, for that reason.
Sarah, you had a lot of things about this on the. Oh, sorry, go Sam. If you can start.
Well, just very quickly, I don't mean to cut Sarah off. Yeah, it resonates with what Jean-Philippe said. I mean, certainly a lot of the industries that I look at, product adoption is not so much about the technology. It's usually gated by skepticism. So, like everyone has tried to use technology, and 80% of the time it hasn't worked. So people still want to use technology and still believe that it can save costs, but they've done it before, it hasn't worked out. Why is AI this time going to be different? But the point of that analogy is that we typically see people that have in manufacturing or supply chain, people who have deep domain expertise. They not only understand sort of the persona that they are selling to, what language should I use and how should I pitch this and how do I speak about competitors, but they also obviously have oftentimes the hopefully the gravitas and connectivity within the network to breach that first customer, the second customer that everyone is kind of looking for to have faith in the solution working. So I guess that's very specific to some of the industries that maybe I look at and Jean-Philippe looks at. I guess it also plays into a bit of this narrative in the market of like, I don't know if it's still a meme, but people were saying software's dead. I'm not a software investor, so I don't have a dog in that race, so to speak. But certainly I've seen a lot of builders and founders kind of try and tackle more complex use cases in the physical world. Whether that's because of the problems in that space or because of that meme, I don't know, but I've certainly seen that trend.
Maybe Sarah, you
Yeah.
want to jump in?
Sure. On our end, a bit more on the software-driven space. I still think we're going to see teams that have co-founder that is a bit more technical and the person that absolute domain expertise. The technical person, as time evolves, wouldn't need to be so specialist, but I still don't think we're going to have the lovable that solves all the product, all the problems technically, and that you just pull up this factory GPT AI agent with off the shelf or no code platform at the moment. I think that's a bit far off. So we'll see the technical co-founder that knows which models to plug in for the right outcome. We hear from our technical founders that each week there's a new model that helps with each kind of data, because let's not forget that in the industrial context we have very different kinds of data. So it's all about how you use them, integrate them. And then on the other side, as these models coming to more perfection, and we have this co-founder that will be like plugging and playing with this kind of models and data, the other founder or the same person, ideally, if that exists, will be doing all the heavy lifting of integration and managing the operations, because in the end, also the industrial context is really, really hard to sell. Let's not forget this is a old school still. Value incentives work differently, and you need to sell to eventually to a factory floor. It's not that you just do outbound calls and off you go. So domain expertise, I totally echo what Jean-Philippe and Sam said, are going to become increasingly important for sure.
But it is
Yeah,
interesting point that exactly. Oh, sorry, Jean-Philippe, go.
No, yeah, just to give a feedback about that. Don't sell the tech, sell the outcome. And I'm so fed up to see a PowerPoint or whatever presentation with the name of the company and the solution being powered by AI. Okay, but what's the outcome? What are you selling? You're selling the outcome, not AI. AI is just a tech delivering an outcome, and I hope this trend will finish soon and we'll get back to the value created for the customer instead of powered by AI.
And I think that's like, I think why I have a feeling that's why we all like these like hard industries in a sense, because I feel like and also maybe the trend of software is dead, in the sense that if you look at a pure play software company which does whatever meeting booking software or something, like it feels that, to your point, Sarah, you can kind of lovable code that or Claude code whatever in like a couple of days, and now what you're going to do with the tech team? Like, what's the point? Now you kind of have it. Now it's just a sales effort. So the problem is like this heavy commoditizing industry, and it's really tricky to have any defensibility. And essentially, it's a race to the bottom. I think that I think we all use these different kind of Calendlies or whatever, where we're sending out a link and people can pick times or something. Like, if we wanted, now the four of us could literally tomorrow start a company which done like calendar booking something, and we would vibe code it together and we would put it online and we try to sell it, but it would be a complete race to the bottom. Like, we would essentially just try to like undercharge, and it would be an SEO game and a naming game and a marketing game to get out there. Whereas I think that, to your point, Sarah, what's interesting about these companies is that if you're coming to a factory floor and you actually know what they're doing at that factory floor, like, you might vibe code or like build something here, right? But the headache is that you need, to Jean-Philippe's point, you need to sell the outcome. You need to say, look, you do visual inspection. You're 9 people here. Like this is like a complicated setup. What you need is a camera and our software, and it's going to tag the things, and you need this and that. And now you don't have to do this. The sorting is going to happen. And as the customer, I think a lot of times when they hear these AI pitches, I mean, I've seen that like our startups are like sometimes even struggling with this. They're just like this customer saying, sounds too good to be true. Like, if you can do this, then, I'll definitely want to try it. The cool thing is this is also then is very much an industry of pilots. You come in, you run the pilot, and then the customer sees it working, and they're like, "Oh my God, it's not magic, it's just tech of 2025." So I think that's like I think it creates quite a lot of problems. I think that like how do you actually get in? Do you need to raise more money? Do you need to change like how you get in? It's because if they add more like value by doing intros, like Jean-Philippe and OSS, obviously, like you have the customers. Is it like what is the thing? Like what how does this change the playing field now when people can sort of change manufacturing logistics with software? Go, Sarah.
Yeah, I think it's a bit ironic the situation that we're at with AI and the capital intensity, exactly, because it's supposed that uh, it's cheaper than ever to build this line of codes, and we should be expecting that these companies need less capital. But we keep on seeing mega rounds. So I understand that where founders are coming from. You want to build fast and hire top talent, which is very expensive at the moment, and be able to secure them. But at the same time, I feel that riding this wave at this moment puts a lot of pressure in the company. Um, so yeah, I think it's a tricky point in that sense. But again, coming back to the basics, I think if you can combine that domain expertise and that tech side with a lot of commons, that makes a ton of sense, and will help that with capital efficiency as
To, to get back on this point, Sarah, because I'm the old dog of this panel, I have the feeling that we are back 20 years ago when SaaS started to spread all over the world. And our thesis here at OSS is that we will see, at least for the software and manufacturing, the future category leader to be built in the 3 to 5 coming years, which could imply a race for velocity and maybe ask for quite a lot of money to go fast, because we have to win this race. But in the meantime, I agree with you. These companies are putting themselves under an amazing amount of pressure, because when you raise a lot of money, the expectations are very high too.
I think what I also like think about a bit is like and the reason when we started talking about this panel, the reason I think about this is if I were a founder today, if I were 25 to 35 and I'd worked in any single industry that I actually knew about that industry, I would literally on the evening and nights, I would just try to like build something and try to solve these problems and essentially leave and start a startup and not take in VCs and just like iterate with my customer, because I think the cost of capital, like it's just so easy to get in and start doing something and then build something for real. To your point, Jean-Philippe, it's like either then you go out and raise this 20 million round, but then you're looking for unicorn crazy exits, or you just own your whole company and you build a company which, like, sure, you get 3 million revenue turnover total, like that's where you stop. But now you own the whole company. Like, like you can, if you can do dividends, you can do whatever you want. And I think that's
Exactly.
what I find also so exciting is that that's what I would do if I were 25 to 35. I would get industry experience and then I would attack an industry. And I think to that, what industries would you want to see more founders attack? I think that I can start by saying what I don't want to see. Oh no, Sarah has some connection issues here. What I don't want to see is one of the things I find most frustrating is founders that are essentially giving like a chat GPT interface, like literally a chat to your data interface, where when the customer has to be very well educated in what they want, and now they can suddenly chat to their databases or chat to their factory floor or chat to their manufacturing lines, whatever. But essentially it's a very lazy UI of just saying, here's like a massive prompt and it says, what do you want to know? And now you have to go and ask. And I think that's one of the things I get very frustrated by, these like chat GPT UIs for complex data. And that's all it is. And maybe that's the thing I get most tired on. But do you want to like, do you start by saying what industries or problems do you wish you saw more founders in? Do you want to go, Sam? Now, like I see that you're keen on this one.
Oh, no, that's a tough question. Yeah, it's almost much easier to answer companies that I've seen too many of, and
Go, that's great.
over the last year, I've seen so many companies that have some sort of robotic end effector doing some type of warehouse automation, which I think is definitely interesting. But I suspect there'll be a lot of fairly localized players. In terms of companies that I wish there were more of, I mean, I guess maybe in energy or power generation seems to be an issue because of AI, somewhat ironically, and one that, you know, we have a multitude of issues on in terms of not only new technologies, existing technologies, grid interconnect issues, permitting issues, NIMBYism. So I'd love to see more within that. I'm trying to think of what else. You might have to get back to me.
I can comment when you're thinking. I think it's interesting. Think about power generation there for the people listening. Think about fusion. How do you contain like an tokamak, handle a fusion, like a handle plasma going around? It's a perfect, like it's a super nice problem for an optimization problem, right? Which is a super multi-complex problem. Perfect for a non-linear model. But then as you said, Sam, look at like grid optimizations on placement of batteries or anything like that. We have so much data. It's just like to both Sam and Jean-Philippe's points earlier, it's just too much data for humans' head, right? So it's a perfect problem to actually map out and say, hey, we should set up a battery storage park here. And you can actually quite easily calculate the savings just because of grid zones and stuff like that. And those are companies that you can start. It's the real industry. Sorry, go, Sam.
Yeah, and to jump in on that, I mean, so we've spoken a lot about, I guess, vibe coded AI, which is sort of synonymous with LLMs, which obviously, you know, there's a whole load of other forms of AI from reinforcement learning, etc. But DeepMind have done some really cool work with regards to fusion. So I think they announced a couple of weeks ago they have a new partnership with Commonwealth Fusion Systems. They've built a simulator called Thorax that effectively uses reinforcement learning to try and better understand plasma confinement, which is a concept that is way too complicated for me to understand or explain, but it's an interesting use of AI, you know, very, very complex AI for some of these new technologies. So sorry, I just wanted to sort of interject on that as something that is a bit more research-based, but definitely very interesting.
And the question is, of course, is it a big market? Can you sell to, you know, fusion companies or not? So like maybe it becomes that you're a research product only, but it is obvious that there are things there. Or I could see like turbine design optimization, just like how do you actually design that? It feels like one of those problems, like, yeah, if you can do 10% improvements, that would be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to that point, you're seeing AI tackle a lot of physics problems, which is not to say that there's a problem with physics, but how do we understand physics better? How do we understand things like CFDs? There's a bunch of sort of new types of models that people call PIN, which are physics-inspired neural nets. And all of these are effectively designed for us to better understand sort of this very, very, very complex system, which is physics, which is often less deterministic than we think, but ultimately so that we can design a bunch of new products, new technologies, predominantly in simulation as opposed to in the real world. And I think, unfortunately, the reality of sort of sim to real, as they call it, is there is always a gap. It's just a lot of this research is working on bringing that gap down through time. And at least, you know, I guess the ultimate goal is for these physics-inspired models to be basically run sort of one-to-one in simulation versus the physical world. So you can design things like aeroplanes or jet engines on your computer. You build and ship it, and it works as predicted. That I find super interesting. But it's a complex field that requires very, very deep understanding and technical capabilities around. So I feel like I'm taking the panel a bit.
No, that's great. I also like,
left field
but
here.
I have one thing, Sam, before you're else. Like you also talked a bit about exactly that AI tools for hardware. The fact that a lot of people are thinking, oh, lovable is like what we're talking about on this panel, but like please double click on the fact of like that there are actually quite a lot of interesting tools that if you're doing turbine design or airplane design or whatever, and I think everybody's known and thought about protein folding, which is a messy, complicated problem. But do you want to like give a couple of hints there for the people in the audience who are thinking about more pure play hardware and how they're thinking about it and what tools they should use?
Yeah, I guess there's sort of a bunch of what people call generative tools. And I don't actually know what technology underlies a bunch of them, but the sort of general goal is to make design faster. So hardware design, which is predominantly CAD, much, much faster. So historically, you would use a bunch of software packages, and there's a few Autodesk, etc. And you would sort of click around the screen and sort of build these different units using whatever kernel that you're using, and whatever geometries. And there's a whole load of new tools that are designed to speed up that process and speed it up in a number of different ways. One, you can generate specific objects using natural language. So you could say, hey, I want to insert a screw here, and you type it in and the screw magically pops up, and then you can fiddle around with it. And that's super useful because it just saves you a lot of time. And there's some tools like zoo.dev, Entopology, sort of, I believe, and a bunch of other ones that are out there. And there are also a bunch of sort of new generative modalities that you can effectively define a bunch of parameters. So, hey, I want to build a car, and it can't be bigger than 2 meters long and 1.5 meters high. I'm making it up here. And have a bunch of these other parameters, and you have a bunch of rulers, and it can effectively sort of totally generate the design from new, and you can fiddle around with those. And the interesting things about those tools, from what I've seen, is typically in hardware design sort of dies a bit of a death once you start getting more teams involved. So you get requirements involved, and you get QA involved, and they start saying, well, you can't do this and you can't do that, and supply chain involved, and they say that part doesn't exist. And a lot of these tools actually mean you can bring connectivity and insights to those different teams much faster. So, hey, whilst we're still in the design phase, let's see what our supply chain team is going to say in terms of what tools we want, and we can fiddle around with the design in sort of more of a generative way. So that I found really interesting. And I, hope that will massively reduce the time to design and ultimately build and deploy a lot of these new hardware solutions. And it's definitely a really, really interesting space. It's one that the sort of market has been dominated by a few players, the Autodesks of this world, but there's a few people who are out there that are trying to attack it. Shaper 3D, Entopology, generative engineering in London. So that's definitely a very cool space, and sort of intersects a bit with both hardware and vibe coding to some extent, or vibe designing, I should say.
Yeah, vibe designing hardware. Philippe, did you have thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, I would just wanted to say how much I agree with you when you said you're fed up with ChatGPT interface. ChatGPT better. I'm so fed up with the RAG and all this kind of. If it's just this techno and nothing, no use case on top of this techno, you don't sell the techno by itself. Does not make sense. Again, I think it's important to sell the outcome. And this is why, by the way, I've seen so many co-pilot use case failure in the manufacturing, like a lot. What I would like to see is AI helping engineer to understand complex system. Just to give you an example, we have a company called Juno, G-U-N-O. They work with textile manufacturers, and they help them to understand how to better manage their dyeing process. So human beings are doing dyeing for 1,000 years, but it's still a complex problem to be solved, because there are so many parameters: the temperature, the water, the quality of the chemicals, etc. And the good at first time rate is something like 85%. And every additional 1%, it's 3 million savings. And they have been able to understand the node of correlation, because of course it's not a one-to-one correlation. It would have been too easy. It's a node, and help them to save 5%. So you can imagine how many millions savings these guys are facing for something that has been created 1,000 years ago, dyeing process, so coloring the clothes. So what are really interesting is, how do you support the engineer's job to better understand complex system, or building hardware at the speed of software, as suggested Sam, because of new tech.
Hi, looking back, sorry. Bit crazy that we're talking about such futuristic things and I cannot make my internet work. Anyway, I'm glad I'm back. Couple of companies I'd love to see there. One, who is a company called Carbonry. I think they're doing something pretty interesting, and what they're helping, it's through AI, unlock the use of waste as a feedstock. So there are certain processes, like for instance cement production, where you need a very homogeneous input in order for the process to work, because you cannot adapt it live, pressure, temperature, and whatnot. And so if you unlock with AI agents the operations, and you can like fine tune at each moment the way the industrial process works, now you unlock the opportunity to use actually, for instance, other waste stream.
Oh no. No, you're back, Sarah. Sorry. I'm just worried your connection is here, but like, please go on. Sorry.
No, so I was just saying that if you're able to update live the process, the industrial process of production, you can unlock other feedstock, for instance, waste streams. And this, in fact, has a very strong economic proposition as well, on being able to have and close the loop circularity in other production processes. Second one, I think is not as fancy, but I think is a great application as well of AI in the industrial context. Is using AI for everything that is around sensors, but also in the installation of them. So we've seen sensors, for instance, for water monitoring in very water-intensive processes, very difficult to install them, and AI is helping the operators assist with the installation. You cut costs, you increase in the adoption, and everything that has to do with the maintenance logs. And so I think AI has a lot of applications, not only through the industrial process itself, but also everything that goes on top for maintenance and installation of sensors, and automating other parts of the process as well.
Like Sarah, I mean, like you're also allowed to give a thing that you don't want to see more of. I think you missed that. Like, Sam and I both had an anti category. Well, Jean-Philippe, you did too on the ChatGPT interface. But do you have something where it's like, please don't pitch me this ever again, or at least for 3 years?
Please don't use the word AI, I guess, or just be honest about it. Like, if you're doing old AI, it's okay. We don't need to. Sometimes there's no need.
for these new GPTs or these LLMs to be implemented just for the sake of it. And I think I understand why the word AI is exploited and it attracts a lot of attention, but I think it's refreshing when you talk to a founder, they're like, look, we're using these LLMs or AI, new AI for pure internal efficiencies, for cheaper coding, for being faster. And so I guess it's not so much about a model, but I think what I don't want to see is so much founders monetizing the word just for the sake of it. I think being comfortable in saying whether it makes sense or not, and being super honest about it. And it's going to also help even with the discussion with investors. I think when we double click is when we see the reality. So I'd say I'm more reticent in that narrative than in specific models.
Mm. I also feel like one worry I have is because it's so much easier now to build a company. Like I think also you said a bit, Jean-Philippe, that it's kind of like software all over again. It's like 2000, but now we happen to be 2025, and I think that one thing I'm worried about is that very few founders are thinking about moat and defensibility. So like it's easy to see how a company can figure out and build a company which gets like a couple of 100,000 revenue, like get one or two first customers that are local. And back to your point, Sam, before that, it's like you find local winners. So if you get advice to founders, like how do you make sure that you're not getting trapped and being like a local minima where like you're building a very, very small company and you're trying to bring in VC money, you want to raise a lot of money, VCs need a big exit. How do you get out of that? How can you get out of a local maxima to a more relevant big company? Any thoughts?
I mean, it's a tough one. I sometimes feel that it sounds a bit philosophical, but people have to be just very intentional and aware of what they want to achieve. Sort of the warning of venture capital is it might be on some level easy-ish to raise, not that it's easy to raise, but easier than maybe getting bank financing or borrowing money from friends and family. But it does come with the caveat that VCs want you to build something that is huge. So I think sort of like step number one is you really need to understand, do I want to do the venture track? Do I want to build something that is multiple billions of dollars and everything that comes with that? And no is certainly a reasonable answer to that. And obviously, given it's my job, yes is a very reasonable answer to that. I think in terms of the specific advice of how to go from sort of smaller market to bigger one, this sounds very trite, but from what I've seen time and time again with founders is that at the stage that I invest pre-seed, it's actually a lot of the time very hard to know how big something can actually really be. A lot of the sort of market sizing is very much pie in the sky stuff. Everyone can come out with a big number. Having said that, you always get a sense if something is truly sort of very, very niche or truly huge. But the point being, when people sort of set out on initial journeys or initial products, it can be in something which is small-ish. It might be to just become the best warehouse automation company in London, and then the best warehouse automation company in southeast of England. What I've seen time and time again is actually often the difference between individuals and teams that have smallish companies and ones who have big ones is just the want and desire when you're 5, 6, 7 years in and you've been grinding for what seems like a very, very long time to keep going, to find, to expand from southeast of England to all of England and then to Europe, and then to do from product 1 to product 2, can I find an adjacency from pick and place to maybe visual inspection to maybe supply chain management or something. So this probably isn't the answer that you're looking for, Hampus, or that people might be wanting to hear. But from what I've seen, often desire is sort of the gating factor to people finding more and more products to build, to sell, and markets to enter into. I guess if you were being sort of purely logical about it, you would try to find initial markets that have big depth and that have some form of market dynamic that means that you can continue to scale for a very, very long time. But I'm always surprised how few sort of obvious ones are really, really out there. But anyway, that's just my view.
I totally agree. I think for me, it is really, I think every time we do a TAM analysis, and I mean, we do pre-seed and seed, is the fact that, like, take any industry, just like anything, it's very large. It's hundreds of billions. The question is, like, how much can you get out of that? Like, you know, do you get, like, how many customers and what value do you create per customer, right? And I think that's almost impossible. I think that for me is that I think the good thing with the tools we're seeing right now is I think that for once in history, founders can actually build a company without VC, which means that now founders can decide, do I want to build a local company where I own 100% of this company and end up having, you know, the best warehouse company in Southern England? That's amazing. That's an insane company to own. Or do I want to go and be crazy and raise millions and like scale and scale and scale? So I think that I actually hope that now there's an option, because previously, just 5 years ago, people had to kind of lie either to themselves or to the VC and say, we're building a massive company. And now they can just say, I don't need you. Like, I just build something quick. So I think for me, I'm really excited to see the founders we're meeting, that we see higher ambition levels on the ambitious founders. And then we see founders who are saying, I just need 200K from you, and that's all money I'm going to raise, and then we're going to be cash flow positive and return like 3 times the money to you in 3 years. And I'm like, oh, great, we're not interested. That's amazing to hear for you. Like, it's amazing. Like, that's super happy to hear that you know what you're going to do. Do you have thoughts, Jean-Philippe or Sarah, about this problem? About
Maybe.
Yeah, I think we're gonna go back to the basics of old school software investing at some point from Jean-Philippe. But so, you know, the way one thinks of sources of advantage in software, right? Like high switching costs, regulatory barriers, or IP, of course. But I think we're gonna, when one thinks of defensibility modes, we're gonna at some point come back to those that we saw in software similarly, and when we'll look back, we'll probably reverse engineer it from there. And last, I think you guys are talking about founders. I think that's a really important one, especially at pre-seed with Hampus. It's your sweet spot. You're looking for unique founders with unique sense of urgency, ambition, and many more qualities. And I think it all is going to come down to founders as well, for sure.
Well, the total addressable market thing, I think today AI is competing with job market. So I don't think there is a problem of TAM being too small, because we are talking about automatizing repeatable low added value intellectual task. So the market is just huge. I think that AI is to white collar what automation has been to blue collar. So in the past 50 years, a lot of blue collar has been replaced by automate. And this is what is going to happen to some of the white collar. So I'm not worried about the total addressable market. And on top of that, we try to never talk about market at OSS. We always try to talk about sub-segment. Sometimes the segment is only 500 companies in France or in Europe, but we want to have the best product market fit for this 500 company to get 20-30% market share with these 500 only companies. And then this is where we start to think about, can we address the nearest addressable subsegment close to the first one and grow from subsegment to subsegment. So we have a different approach from the market, and we focus always to the outcome and what we call the 10x, how the product is delivering 10 times more value than the present solution. the existing solution being sometimes human, being another software, being Excel, whatever, paper. But if you deliver 10 times more value than the existing solution, you will sell fast, and you will have no problem to get access to capital. And again,
I love. Yeah, sorry.
Sam, I completely agree with you. Going the VC way is not the only way, and sometimes it's not the smartest way. For whatever reason, work life, your personal life balance, whatever. If you go this way, it's a hard way. So be aware of it, and maybe it's not the way for you, and there is no problem with it.
I know plenty of founders that, like plenty of very wealthy founders that never took VC. I think that's like, but now realizing we're closing in on 8 p.m. CET here, and for the Americans, you still have a day, but we in Europe, we have to get kids to bed and other things. But just to try to wrap up like where we are, like we talked about now, one question to ask yourself as a founder when you're talking to VC is it really AI? And to Sarah's point, don't oversell the AI. Don't come in and talk about AI if that's not actually, if you're fundamentally developing new models, then yeah, of course, to talk about it. Otherwise, like talk about some, like, talk about the use case. And to Jean-Philippe's points, which was really loved and appreciated on the chat here as well, is that a big learning is don't sell the tech, sell the outcome. And I totally agree. It's one of those things that if like nobody's looking to buy AI or tech. And I think that what we talked about as well are that the benefits and why you should all, or where we all should adopt AI, is that we can run smaller team and smaller cost to market, as Sam talked about. We can solve all these problems, and we don't need a 500 people tech team. We can have maybe a 5-person tech team, which is insane. You can disseminate that information wider into your team as the customer, and then suddenly they can actually solve problems in real time. To your point, Sarah, also about like we don't need deep tech teams, but you definitely still need a tech team. Like we VCs like to see a tech founder, because like it's still, you're not going to lovable code your product together. And to really, like all we talked about here is that customer insights are really, really, really vital. Like it's the rise of people with like who has worked in the industry or thought about the industry or dedicate themselves fully into one industry and dive deep in it. One thing that we did chat a bit about is that hard industries provide a massive moat. The nice thing about not being a booking software is that if you actually have customers and suck data out of them and make it really available and easily for people to use, that industry will not replace you. Like they really like you. And if there's a competitor, if it works way more than it used to be, because the integration is way harder. One thing we now end up talking about a bit in the end is that with the Gen AI, you might not be the VCs. You can actually go up and want to build your own company and own it 100%. But also to Sam's point is that if you want to build a massive global company, the biggest rate limiter is probably your ambition. So I would say thank you very, very much for joining us and listening today. And I'm really happy that we, the four of us, had a great conversation.
Amazing. Thank you, Hampus and SOSV.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.